Well, hello, Sandy.
Amy, happy week. Podcast
Happy
week, podcast day.
podcast day. It's always fun to kick off the week with a podcast and visiting with you. How are things going?
Good. I have to laugh. I went and walked the dog before I came in, and the weather changes like that. It was summerish. This not summerish, but like a spring to summer turn on this weekend where it was like 70s. And I walked the dog this morning with just a sweatshirt on, and so I'm still trying to thaw it. It dropped at least 10 degrees in one
Oh,
day.
oh, that's a big, that's a
It's
drastic.
big.
This time of year is so wonky with that, especially when you walk the dog, or at least for
Right.
me, I walk at 7 a.m. with our dog, and it can be 50 degrees, it can be 65, and it's a complete spectrum of how you feel. You have to like figure out what to wear every morning.
And
At least,
the wind and sun
oh,
makes such a difference. So anyway, it's just funny. I
and
came
rain.
in and
Yeah.
Garrett
Yeah.
asked me how was the walk, and I'm like, it was cold. I should have had a little beanie on and gloves, but I didn't. But it's all good. How about you, Amy? How are you?
Good, good, good. We're packing and moving and yeah, getting ready to next recording. I will be at the new place,
Oh, I can't
which
wait.
I know it'll be a whole different background, which will be fun.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about adult gap year. And I will tell you this idea, you sent an article about it, and this idea just it had me like spiraling into research. I was like, wow, there's so much opportunity to do this. And there's so many articles about how to plan for it and all that stuff. So, do you want to share the article or talk about that?
Yeah, the article was, and we'll share it in the notes and in social media posts too. It came from the Associated Press, and what they talked about was breaking from routine with a mini sabbatical or adult gap year can be rejuvenating. And they talk about just taking time off, whether when there's a break, like a mini sabbatical, let's say a change in jobs, taking some leave, making a new move. And where it came up to is COVID. People were forced into a mini sabbatical. And then they talked about the upheaval of the pandemic, but then they also talked about there is a new project called the Sabbatical Project, which is a more humane relationship with work because they encourage extended leaves. And I thought that was really interesting too. But it was this article that spurred the conversation. And like you said, Amy, there's a lot out there, but it also reminded me of I did a mini sabbatical and I didn't even know that's what it was. Now that I look back, it's like, wow, that was so awesome.
Yeah.
And it was for me a break in a job. And and at that time, taking time off or sabbaticals was really not part of the American culture. And what I'm finding and finding interesting, and part of our conversation is I'm hearing now more companies are having sabbaticals for their leaders. And that was not a thing back when I wasn't self-employed. So I
Yeah.
just a lot of interesting things that have happened. And I don't know if that's a COVID thing. I can't wait to hear what you've read in your research. Has this come off of COVID? I mean, what did you read? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I read a whole Reddit stream because that's it was like somebody was thinking about it. And all of the responses were, yes, do it. You will not regret it. And everybody was like, I did this, I've done this, I need to do this, I want to do this. It was everybody was like all enthusiastic about it. And only a few people raised concerns. And the concerns were, what are you doing for health insurance?
Right.
Because if you leave your job, and then what are you doing for a job when you're done? Like how do you maneuver this? Because some people are doing it and leaving their job to do it. Some people are trying to keep their job and take a break. There's different ways to do it. And I will tell you, I think it's more common now. I remember my brother had a job with Intel. I was like,
Okay.
what company was it? It was down in New Mexico. And he got sabbatical after 5 years. He had like a 4 week sabbatical, I think. That's
Really?
what they called it. And this was 20 years ago. And I remember thinking, wow, that's really nice. So you got after so much time, and then each like certain milestones, you got more time.
Which is so European, right?
Right. Yeah. Anyway, everything I saw was like, yeah, do it, go for it. Um, but what would you do? This makes me think of Eat, Pray, Love. Like, what would you do?
Well, I'll tell you what I did, and I'll tell you, like, my now looking back at it. So one thing I will say is I so now I'm not 60, I'm 56. And I here I have a lot of friends that are retiring. I'm in that age where the conversation comes up quite a bit about retirement and newly retired people. And what I'm hearing is, I don't have a purpose. Oh my gosh, what do I do? So one thing I'll say is, now looking back, because hindsight is a beautiful thing, a mini sabbatical is a great training ground for what you're going to do when you're retired, and kind of like what that looks like.
Mhm.
Okay. So one thing I would say is, and those people, especially the ones that say, oh my gosh, I was so looking forward to this. And then it's like, what am I going to do? So back to my mini sabbatical, I would have been I think it was 2015. And actually, I was trying to search because I think I wrote a blog almost through that time period that I took that mini sabbatical. So it'll be fun for me to go back and reread that. But I had a switch in jobs, and I left one. I didn't know what else, I didn't know what I was going to do. It was when I was in the startup, and I left the startup, and I'm like, what am I going to do now? And I just decided I was going to take time off. And if I remember correctly, I had said I'm going to take 3 months off to figure this out. Amy, it turned into 6 months, and it's because I didn't want to go back. And
Yeah.
what I'll tell you too is, and I didn't read Eat, Pray, Love, but I had that like the day, right, 24 hours I gave it. And I'm like, I'm just going to take time off to clear my head. I wasn't thinking mini sabbatical. It's just like, I got to think before I know what I want to do. And I really want to investigate. Um, so if it was in 2015, that would have been what, 9 years ago. So you're totally in a different mindset in your 40s than your 50s, because it was all about what's my career going to be. And I've got, this long runway. But I had realized that I hadn't come up for breath since I started college. I had realized when I looked back that I just went from I started college, I had the summer off. That was the last time I had time off. And I really didn't take adequate time off for my kids when I had kids either. Because I had the mindset of when I had kids, I would save up time so I could, go not so much full time, but I never really took big periods of time off. But I graduated from college on a Saturday, and I started my new job at Kiewit on Monday morning. I
Oh,
literally drove to Omaha and started Monday morning. So I felt like every time I never took a break. And Amy, it was awesome. And what did I do? Part of leading with my strengths and my value proposition, I love to build communities, and I lead with relationship. I remember dumping down my contact list, and even like people that I just enjoyed for feedback, conversation, that I knew would authentically, have conversations with me where I could clear my head a little bit. I didn't overdo it, but I just set different appointments for coffees and lunches and walks, and maybe favorite clients that were retired. I'd go for coffee, but I never lacked for things to do.
yeah.
I went on vacations. I went on a lot of vacations. I slept in more. I read more. Yeah, it was from somebody who never stopped and was whirlwind. It was a very joyful period. Like I said, and then I extended it because it's like, oh, this doesn't suck. I'm going to keep doing this for a while. And then when I did decide I'm going to do I was very mindful. I was in a great place to choose what I wanted to do. And it was more like stepping stones into what I ultimately wanted to do, because I still had, kids in college and high school. And I kind of had a transition plan that I went for, and it all worked out. And I'll tell you, I have no reservations about the time when I retire, because I've kind of I did a little training exercise, and it was darn good. I know what that will look like.
Yeah. You
And I
took a
kind of
step,
do it halfway now. So
right. That's great. So when you did yours, did you have some milestones? Like when you were planning your 3 month off, was it just a blank 3 months, or did you have some things, some goals or milestones that you wanted to achieve? Or was it just silence?
I
Like,
think my milestones were to check off the list, some vacations, which really had to do with visiting family members, like spending time. I got all the grandkids and we went and visited my mom and dad, so I had milestone trips that I knew would take time that almost all included family members. It wasn't just, I'm going to go on a boondoggle and get away by myself. And then the other thing was I did have a list when I dumped down my contact list out of Outlook, and I did a priority on here are the people I want to talk to. And I didn't have an end goal other than just open input and dialogue to open ideas on what I do want to do, get input from them on what they see, people that I authentically communicated with and trusted. But then
right.
what I did, Amy, is I said, I absolutely have to talk to them before the end of the 3 months. These I need to, and then, it actually helped me remove people from my contact list too. But it was more about the people and the relationships for me. But I was also in a point in my life where I needed to make decisions on what to do. And there was even a part of that, I was married to Garrett. That was about where to live.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot in there. So I was really looking for mentorship and maybe joyful communication. So it was all about, for me, the checklist of people to talk to and the people to see and spend time with.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So it ended up being 6 months. And then did you move after that? Was that when you
No,
decided? No.
let's see. So that was 15, 16, 2 more years until Grant graduated from high school. So stayed and then moved two, and then there was kind of a year where I went back and forth. So what I ended up doing is transitioning, and I decided what the big decision for me was to set up my own consulting company. And what that looked like was kind of all over the place. But what I knew is I was never going to be a W-2 employee for someone again. And I didn't want to go huge. I knew the clarity was I knew that my sweet spot was in building communities. But when it got to the point that the need was for somebody to build cities, that's not my thing. And so
Yeah.
what I could do within my consulting company and partnerships with other people, because, been there, done that. I built the cities, and I wanted to downsize to communities again. And then I just picked jobs that worked very well, and there were very good opportunities that they needed short term. Like I did interim CFO work, short term. And when I say short term, 1 to 2 year gigs, until Grant graduated. And then that's when I kicked off. It was really after that I kicked off the speaking, got away from the financial, right? The speaking, the workshops, and what I really wanted to do in my consulting company. But it was a transition. And it really took that mini gap year, the sabbatical, for me to say, what do I want to do? Because people do chirp in your ear a lot, and you have been branded to a formed identity that
Right.
I was told a lot. You can't do that. You have to do this. You have to work in big healthcare. And I had offers, I mean,
Yeah.
CFO of a hospital, big things. And I just knew in my heart in that sabbatical, because I would walked away from everything to say, I can't do this. This isn't what I want to do, but you really have to get away from it to clear your head. And whether it be, what does constitute a sabbatical, Amy? How long would you say? Does it have to be 4 weeks or more? I mean, is there a time period? Because is 2 weeks of vacation and 4 weeks of sabbatical? What's the
I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm thinking it's just whatever you want to call it. It's your choice. I think a vacation's different because you're like going away and you're filling your time with entertainment. Like it is all about fun. And a sabbatical to me feels like you're taking time to get away from all of the busyness and do some internal refreshing, and like what you did, it was a little bit more than refreshing. It was re-evaluating where you want to go and where you want to be.
One interesting thing, Amy, I was with a large accounting firm for 22 years. And when I left, that wasn't even a thought. It was actually one of the reasons I left was because there was so much of a culture and mentality of work, 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 work. You never take time off, and you got, uh, you were praised for if you worked the most hours, if you worked all weekend. That was the culture, right? And I didn't hate what I did, but I knew I needed to do things differently. Fast forward, I just found out a very dear friend of mine that's still at the firm and just retired. She had told me, well, when I was on sabbatical before COVID, I'm like, you were on sabbatical? She said, yeah, we have mandatory sabbaticals. And I mean,
Oh,
it's not a short one. I think it was like 6 weeks and no communication. And I thought, if, and she was very happy, and she was very happy with the firm and when she retired. And it did make me think, if a sabbatical was available to me at that time in my life, because it was right after my divorce, I had all these things going on that, um, working a lot of hours and being physically in the office all the time did not align with my personal life. And if I would have allowed a sabbatical, would that have changed the outcome? Like maybe it would have been a little bit more, I do need to do something different because this isn't going to work. Or maybe we would have restructured maybe I'd build a new niche in the firm. But I think that sabbatical, I know the sabbatical would have a different outcome, that I would have made as much of a knee-jerk reaction. And I think it would have been so much better for both parties. And I'm so happy they did do that now. And I'm so happy that my friend had that and that they're doing that, and
yeah.
that more companies are embracing it, because I think it's a great thing.
I do too, especially for the people who have been doing the same job. If you've been doing the same job for 10, 10 plus years is what I'm saying, but maybe it's 5 years, but you're doing that job and you haven't had any kind of big break to like refresh. I think it's great. And I love that it's mandatory because some people have a hard time stepping away, but if they make you step away, then it's very clear that you got to do it and you better figure out what you're going to do in that 6 weeks or whatever time it is. Was
Mhm.
it 6 weeks for the firm that she took?
I think so. But again, this
Okay.
is going back to my memory, and
Yeah.
I think it was a long enough time period. I think it was 6 weeks, because I was just shocked. I was flabbergasted because look at how much the culture had changed from going to, you work all the time. I mean, I was told just show up, even if you're not doing work, and walk around so everybody sees you, so it appears that you're working all the time. And that just was counterproductive to me, counterintuitive, because I'm like, I have kids at home, I have a husband. Why would I do that? But look at that culture shift in,
Right.
you know, less than 10 years, right? Probably by the time, well, maybe a little bit more than that. But I just think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. Now, have you ever done a sabbatical
No, I
or a
have
mini sabbatical?
no. I stayed home for a little bit with my kids. So I would say that was probably like it was stepping away from work. So maybe I took like a 5 year sabbatical. I quit working as an engineer and then I started my business. So maybe it was like about a 5 year, but
Right.
I was busy
With
with
kids.
children. And so that was kind of my job at that time. Um, but I do think this idea of a sabbatical, uh, it gives you time to think. And I think that's super important. And there's tons of opportunity. I was reading, uh, there's tons of opportunity, especially people our age. You can go online and you can find a service, a year of service or a summer of service, and you travel to like one of the national parks and you work at the national park for the summer, which I was like, all right, I would do that and just have time outside of your normal routine in a different environment where you get to experience something different.
Oh, I love that. And I do hear people doing things like that all the time. You're just getting out of their routine, their zone, their group of people, just to think. And don't you think the biggest thing is the mindfulness of allowing yourself to go in your head and your heart and
Yeah.
think about what the future looks like. It could be short term, it could be long term, but you always have to think about tomorrow and the next day.
Yeah.
Um, it was during that time, I'm posting on LinkedIn now. I got recertified as a strengths coach, but it was during that sabbatical that I said, oh, I want to be a Gallup strengths coach. Well, I mean, back to, you need to lead in finance, you need to be the CFO of a hospital, do you really need to be a strengths coach? But I had this longing to do that. And it's a time commitment and it's a cost commitment, but it was that mini sabbatical that said to me that allowed me to think through and say to myself, you can do this.
Yeah.
And I've used it in so many ways, personally, professionally, even the business type coaching clients that I have. It's such a great tool that I'm glad I invested the time, energy to do. And it's paid itself forward many a times. But Amy, I never would have done it or thought about it if I didn't take that little sabbatical.
Right. You had time to do something because when you're working full time, you don't have time to add something else onto your plate.
Right.
So that gives you space to do something that you're interested in and try it.
And for me, I tell you the other thing, and this is where the sabbatical comes into place. There was some anger with what where I left with certain people, with certain things, how things were handled. And that was an example of channeling anger and taking the time to say, what are you going to do about it? The company I came from, the person who ran the strengths used it as more of a manipulation tool, like would read, oh, here's what they are. Oh, they're high in empathy. Well, this is how I'll get them to do what I want. And it really bothered me because you can, if you really know someone well, you can use it to manipulate. And it really bothered me on many accounts of how it was used as a negative instead of a positive. And then I just said, what are you going to do about it? Saying, are you going to bitch about it? Are you going to do something? And that's what ultimately inspired me to say, well, why don't I become a coach and use it in the right way, or make sure people can embrace whether it be that tool or other tools, help people to speak for themselves and have it come out in the right way. But it took the time in the mini sabbatical. I guess it wouldn't be a mini, it'd be a full-fledged if I did 6 months. But my full-fledged sabbatical to say things to take things that were in a bad spot for me, whether they be anger, whether they be disappointment, and say, how am I going to channel that in a way that can be positive where I'm not dwelling on it? So I think taking time, you can change a mindset to positivity, right? And change habits and change to make things better. And so that's where it helped too.
That's great. That's great. Instead of being the victim of this
Right.
whole system, you're like,
Talking about and you have to change your framework because when things go awry, you can be, whether it be divorce or losing a job, or your mind can be defensive and you want to say it over and over again. And we've all been a part of that, either the person or the one listening, where it's like, okay, we got to stop, we got to move on.
yeah,
Sometimes you got to walk away and respin the narrative. And back to those people, I wasn't meeting people because I was trying to tell my story, or say I was very intentional and deliberate in meeting people to say, let's just talk big picture and let's have an honest conversation among friends. What do you see out there? What do what's your feedback to me, knowing me? But
yeah.
I chose people on not a dialogue of reinforce my victimism, I don't know if it's not a word, but it shouldn't be. But it was seeking out people that were going to be the most honest with me and help lift me up and give me the most honest feedback.
Yeah,
That list would be so much easier to come up with people to go bitch to, right? And
totally.
who wants to be on my side?
Which probably being that intentional about who you surrounded yourself with probably changed the avenue that you went, because if you would have chosen the people who are gonna help you dwell on all the victimization
Right.
and not help you move forward, then you could stay in there for 6 months and then you may not have gotten out of that. So that's good. One of the things I read was somebody had asked the question, or I was doing this whole article, and one of the things is this person said somebody was proposing to do a gap year or sabbatical.
Mhm.
And she kept going through all these questions that she was asking this other advisor. And pretty much the advisor said, basically, she just wanted permission. And so I gave her permission, and it was it was a total switch. Like somebody just had to say, yes, do it. So I'm wondering for you, did somebody say, yes, do it? Or was it just you just said, I'm doing it? You know,
Well, you know,
you
I
have
had
a,
no choice because I was, I was basically escorted out of the building. So, I had no choice. My email was turned off. And
I forgot about that. Never mind. So
no, it's all good. So,
you were told to
but
go.
I could have turned around and started something right away, right?
Yeah.
And I was just so exhausted because there was a lot of drama, and drama exhausts the hell out of me. I think more than the usual person. Um, it was probably Garrett who said, you just need to do nothing you just need to readjust your brain, because part of it is reprogramming. If you are in a dramatic situation, a traumatic situation, a intense, you need, everybody's different, but you need an amount of time to unleash that and start over again. Um, I think it's interesting. I have a younger friend that's in between jobs, and people love to say, do you have a new job yet? Do you have a new job? And it's like he had saved up enough money, he's got a plan, but he doesn't want to jump into something new. But there is this knee-jerk reaction to ask people, what are you doing? You can't be doing,
Right.
they're almost, he's fine, but they're worried for him, and they're talking like even behind his back. Oh, does he have anything yet? What? And
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Let a person do their thing and not have to explain away their mini sabbaticals or their extra time they're taking in between.
Right. Well, in this Reddit thread, there was, and I'm going to say a kid, but it could have been a grown adult. I have no idea. And this person said that they would go for like 10 months and then they'd work for 2 months to pay their bills. And I was like, oh, so a little bit of a balance. And they were traveling around. Oh, they had a van. That's what it was. They got a van and they were just traveling around. They'd stop and work when they needed to. And, but at the end, he said, but I'm broke as can be. So I was like, all right, so this is probably not the right plan, because the other piece of it is I saw, you need to plan to do something, but not be pulling all your savings to do it.
Right.
So, how long can you survive and go without tapping into retirement and planning ahead for that? And the other thing I saw was $40 a day. Somebody can do it. You can do it for $40 a day. And I was trying to
Wow.
think through that. That's about $15,000 a year. It's a little bit less than that. But I was like, okay, where do you live for $40 a day? So I'm thinking that's probably camping or something like
Right.
that. I don't
Or
know.
couch surfing a little bit, visiting
Right,
people and staying with it.
yeah,
You could do that if you didn't have to worry about debt, car payment, you could do $40 a day if it was just purely food, living, baseline phone, right?
yeah. Right. You have to have a phone. Okay. So the other thing that I found was if you're contemplating doing this, go forward 10 years in your life and say, all right, in 10 years, am I going to regret doing it? Or am I going to be thankful that I continued working and didn't do it? So you have to like flip
Project
it. And
out into the future rather than flipping it into the moment.
yeah, and just because most people will say, all right, I'm not going to remember continuing to work this 6 months, but I will remember stepping away and getting that refresh and, decluttering my mind. That's what I think about. I
I
think
love
about
that.
decluttering the head.
And I do like when you asked me if I had a plan, which was not the best plan, but I also, I had health insurance, I had the financial means,
Yeah.
I wasn't going on a 3-month trip that went away from my family. But I mean, what would your advice be if you were coaching someone as far as putting a plan together? Would you just have them put their most important milestones, or what would you say to that?
I would probably ask what they're looking for the year. And then I would encourage some milestones because you don't want to take off and lay on the couch for 3 months. You
Right.
know, like there's got to be something that's moving you forward. And so, what is that? And everybody's going to have something different. And I think of my daughter Taylor when she did a gap year between college and grad school.
Mhm.
And she had a plan. Now she's a planner, so I got to give her that. She's a big, she had I can tell you all about Taylor's planning, but um, she gives a lot of it from me. But she had a plan. She got off. She enjoyed her summer. She was working to a certain point. Then she went to Europe. But while she was working, she took her test to get into grad school, and her goal was to make a decision before she went to Europe for 12 weeks. And then when she got to Europe, she did not have the 12 weeks completely mapped out, but she had milestones. Like she had, okay, I know this first week I'm going to Ireland because she had been to Ireland before. And then like at week 4, she was visiting a friend somewhere. So she had these milestones
Right.
and then she just had to fill in the gaps. And she had milestones before she went to Europe of, I have to study for the test. I have to take the test. I have to apply to schools. I have to, figure out where I'm going to go.
Right.
And then leave. And so it wasn't a day by day plan, but it was a plan. And she
Right.
was moving, and she was at the end of the year, she was refreshed because she had been in Europe. Well, I'm going to say maybe not refreshed, maybe exhausted because she was traveling, but fun. Her brain was refreshed. And then she was ready to go off to grad school because she had all the stressful stuff had happened early. And then I was really proud of her, like just watching her because she did it all herself. And she just had that rhythm and she knew exactly what the next step was and she just moved forward for it. So I
Good
think
for
having some
Taylor.
sort of milestones and plan
Right.
is important. So you just don't lounge on the couch for a
Right.
year, or you don't just go and do a job for a year. Like, so say, I'm gonna go work as a hostess at a restaurant just to take a break from my job. And then, you know, you don't, if you just do that for a year, you're just doing another job for a year.
Mhm.
You're not really like refreshing yourself. So
Right.
we're
You're not-
probably, we're at time. I
So
know
it's
there's,
time for us to go on a mini sabbatical for the rest.
yeah. Well, only 1 week, not too long. Over the summer, though, maybe we could call that podcast sabbatical. This
Right.
should have been our last one before the end of the
Oh,
year,
what
but
were we thinking, Amy?
no. Okay. All right. Well, great to talk to you as
Happy
always.
moving, Amy. Can't wait to see the new space.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.